our next story asks the question, is all UPFs unhealthy? And are all UPFs the same? Well, spoiler alert, they're not. So let's get into this. So, at a webinar that was hosted by the Institute of Food Technologists, several key problems facing the research and categorization of ultra processed foods have come up to light. Now, we're talking about some major like PhDs in food technology here, okay? And part of the issue is the NOVA, which is the basically who came up with the different levels of UPFs. They're basically stating there's a lot of confusion here. And just because a food is a level 1 as far as processing goes, doesn't make it healthier or unhealthier versus a level 4. And we'll kind of explain that a little bit further. So, for instance, if you are looking at ground beef, okay, if you have a 75% lean ground beef and you put it next to a 97% lean ground beef, both of those are on the same group as far as processing goes, because both of them just contain beef and then, of course, beef fat, because that's where the percentage comes from. Right. But there isn't additional ingredients or special processing that you couldn't reproduce at home to create those ground beefs. So they're both considered group 1, but nutritionally speaking, there is a big difference between a 75% lean versus a 97% lean.
Oh, yeah.
And so what some of these scientists are trying to point out is if you are looking at UPF classifications to determine whether or not something is healthier to eat, he's saying that this system is flawed because both of these meats are the same group. So you would think they are both equally healthy, and they're not. For some people that have high cholesterol or, are trying to lower their saturated fat, you're going to want to go with the 97% lean. Whereas other people who maybe don't have health restrictions or maybe aren't concerned with the saturated fat, going with 75% could be perfectly healthy for them. So what they're saying is that all these new rules that are being proposed to label products as ultra processed can actually lead to unhealthy choices.
Yeah.
So another kind of examples here. So olive oil, lard, and butter would all be grouped in group 2 for ultra processed. And if you ask anyone, there is definitely different nutrition when it comes to olive oil, lard, and butter.
Oh, yeah.
Now, depending on who you talk to, they may choose a different one as far as which is the healthiest and which is not the healthiest.
Yeah.
But when it just comes down to processing, they are all considered the same. Another one would be canned tuna and canned beans. They would be considered group 3. Now, the higher you get, group 3 and group 4 are items that are more processed. Well, I don't think any, nutritionist is going to tell you to stop eating canned beans or canned tuna because those are actually considered very healthy. Now, this one may ruffle some feathers, but it doesn't matter if you are looking at wheat bread or whole wheat bread. Any bread that is mass produced would be considered group 4. And that is simply because it has preservatives. Now, we're going to get into that a little bit in a little bit because it's going to blow your mind. Okay. But so here's the quote that I think really kind of puts it into perspective. It says, the issue here is that we know that these are not nutritionally equivalent within the same group. So by recommending that people eat only certain categories of processed food, you're not necessarily providing precise nutrient recommendations based off of decades of evidence.
Yeah.
So he's saying that if we tell people only eat from group 1 and 2, you're going to have a whole lot less choices than what's available in the grocery store right now, but you're also going to be missing out on healthy foods that fall in group 3 and group 4. That just because they're ultra processed does not necessarily mean that they are unhealthy. Now, if
Yeah.
we're comparing yogurt to Cheetos, both of those are group 4, especially if that yogurt has flavor.
Oh,
If we're talking plain yogurt with no flavor, that is actually a group 1 food.
that's
But
what
as
I
soon
eat.
as you add flavor to it, even just adding vanilla,
Yeah.
it now becomes group 4. And if it's going to be labeled as ultra processed, which is the proposed rule, it would now, quote unquote, have the same nutritional value as a bag of Cheetos. I don't think so.
That's so bonkers.
It is. But this is why when they make these rules, it sounds okay at at first glance,
Yeah.
but it's only when you really start to understand what is considered ultra processed and what is not that you start going, well, wait a minute, just because it's ultra processed does not mean it's bad for you. Now, I'm not going to debate on whether or not Cheetos are good for you or healthy, because I believe personally in moderation. I believe if you eat a handful of Cheetos every once in a while because you really want them,
Yeah.
that's fine. I would never recommend somebody eat Cheetos at every meal, for eternity, because
Right.
not only are you going to turn orange, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be helpful.
Not
I'm
for us.
serious. You can't eat Cheetos and not get orange on your finger. Just can't.
Just covered
So,
head to toe Cheeto dust. It's fine.
well, I mean, if you ate it at every meal for a week, I'm sure like everything would be orange at that point.
The whole house just has a trail, like a slug trail of orange
A
dust.
slug Cheeto trail. Yeah,
Ah,
that's where we're
yes.
going.
Yeah.
But so here's something interesting as well. So, not every additive in your food is quote unquote bad. Okay. A lot of the food that you look at that is canned, a lot of times has additives for color retention,
Right.
meaning that it doesn't turn brown. Did you know that potato chips, the bag is puffed full of nitrogen to keep potatoes from turning brown? Because
That
nobody
makes
wants to
sense.
eat brown potato chips. So, it's a color people eat with their eyes. So if you had a can of beans that is canned in water with just a little bit of salt, that would be considered a group 3 processing. But as soon as you add anything for color retention to those beans, it now becomes a group 4 because that additive is cosmetic and it's something that you could not do at home. And that's really where group 4 comes into play. You can make your own processed foods at home, levels 1, 2, and 3. But level 4 is different because it typically has additives that are not readily available to a home cook.
Right.
And a lot of those come down to gums and emulsifiers.
Yeah.
And so back to the yogurt. All yogurt would be considered ultra processed except for plain yogurt, simply for the fact that it has an emulsifier that keeps it from separating on the shelf. Similar to when you get like natural peanut butter and it separates on the shelf.
Yeah.
You would then have to train people to start shaking their yogurt before they even opened it. And I don't know that anybody's doing that right now.
I mean,
Um,
I guess it's because as someone who does things along those lines of like the more, I buy plain yogurt. I buy right for bougie time. I buy plain Icelandic yogurt
does
because
it come in a jar? Is it glass?
no, I would love those, but they're too expensive. Like I can't. I can't. I get the big container of like, and it's cheaper than Greek yogurt. So there's that. But I like a more sour taste to my yogurt, so I like Greek yogurts and Icelandic yogurts. So, anyways, regardless, it separates. So I just know that every time I open my yogurt, I have to give it a good stir or it's separate. The same thing with sour cream. And my peanut butter is literally the kind you click the machine on and it crunches the peanuts up. Yes, I know. I'm bougie.
Like already chewed peanuts. Like
But it doesn't have anything in it. There's no additional salt. There's no oils. It's literally just peanut into the thing, and it's delicious. But it separates after time. So like from my perspective, things that separate doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It just means that I've
no.
got to bring them back.
But I think you would just really have to educate people
Yeah,
that from this point forward, if you want yogurt without emulsifiers or gums in it, you would then have to be required to shake it.
shaky,
Um,
shaky.
I now have a Taylor Swift song in my head. Thanks a lot.
Shake it up.
But so here's the other thing. Okay. When you look at foods that are going to be labeled as ultra processed,
Yeah,
there's two really great points that they make. The first one is that they're saying that issues may arise surrounding food waste and the ethics of it, meaning that so that mass produced bread we talked about,
yeah,
if the bread manufacturer, we're talking about even like your Dave's Killer bread that's organic, it has preservatives in it
yeah.
that make it to where that bread is not as temperature sensitive as it would be without preservatives,
Right.
meaning that that bread has to be baked at a factory, then it is shipped to a distributor, and then it is put in a grocery store. That doesn't happen within a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
So we're talking about bread at your grocery store. Instead of lasting like 5 to 7 days, it would now only have a shelf life of like 2 days. And then, so think about all the bread that doesn't get bought, it would just have to go to the landfill because it's moldy.
Yeah.
So some preservatives are literally there in order to make your products last longer so that when you buy it, it doesn't have to be eaten right away.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine like if you go buy an avocado that was perfectly ripe, you have maybe 6 hours to eat it. That's it.
You have the window, the
Yeah,
I'm
that's it.
ready, and then that's it. If you miss that window, mush.
God, if you blink too fast, you missed it.
Don't stare at
But
it the wrong way or it's done.
well, and then here's another thing too. Think about some of your life saving foods. And I'm being dead serious here. Okay. All baby formula would now be listed as ultra processed because the average person is not going to be able to make baby formula at home because it is very scientifically added to a certain amount of nutrients, of minerals, and they have it to where every single scoop of that powder has the exact same caloric count. I mean, it is a very refined process.
Yeah.
And so now you're going to label baby formula as ultra processed, and that is going to scare the hell out of people. People are going to be like, oh no, ultra processed is unhealthy. I can't give that to my baby. And you're going to have babies starving because people won't buy formula.
I think you have to draw the line at things like that. Like, realistically, if this is life sustaining, like, there are no other options. Like, if you're unable to breastfeed for whatever reason, like, it doesn't matter what the reason is. Baby formula exists to feed babies because babies were starving. That's the whole point. So, like,
Yes.
that I think you have to draw the line there because there is no survival for I don't know what the percentages are of babies that use formula or parents that use formula for their babies. Like you can't.
Well, and
There's
it's not even always the case of whether a mom wants to breastfeed or not.
right.
If you have a child that is premature, a lot of times they will fortify breast milk with formula
Yeah.
in order to get that child more calories
Right.
because breast milk in itself has less calories than formula.
Yep.
When my child was in the NICU, we did a combination of breast milk and formula. And if she had not gotten that formula, she wouldn't have gained enough weight. So I am grateful for formula. And you know what? I am amazed at how well science has improved formula.
Yeah.
So you know what? I the proposed rule, and this was by the GMO project, I believe, that they wanted to label all foods whether or not it was considered ultra processed. So they're not going to say, oh no, we're just going to stay away from this category because it's going to scare people. They want to include everything.
So
And
you're
this is
gonna
where
slap
it
sticker.
gets,
Hold on. You're gonna slap stickers on oranges and apples and shit like that. So people, the group
yes.
one apple. Well, it's a group two apple. Wait a second. Why is that a group two apple? Like,
Oh, and that those pre-sliced apples you get that have additives to it, like citric acid to keep it from browning. So that depending on what additives they use,
yep.
if they just use lemon juice, it could be a group two. But if they use citric acid, now it's a group three, possibly four. But tell me, what is the difference between an uncut apple and one that's pre-cut,
A
besides the
knife.
dang price?
A knife. That's it.
Exactly.
You don't eat the knife.
Yeah. So as I understand why you would feel the urge to label everything as ultra processed or not, but you cannot make ultra processed synonymous with unhealthy, don't eat it.
Yeah.
Another great example is egg whites. If you buy an egg, that is group one. As soon as you buy a carton of egg whites, it has to have emulsifiers because if you've ever had an egg white, it's kind of gooey. You have to have something in there.
Mhm.
So now that's considered group four. So you're going to tell me that egg whites are now considered to be as nutritious as Cheetos?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because they're basically stating everything in group four is bad for you. Don't eat it.
Right. No, it's problematic at best. It creates conversation, which I appreciate because, like, to be honest, a couple of months ago when we started all this, if we had started at how do you feel about ultra processed and how do you feel about, you know, unprocessed, like just an apple, like I'd probably the line for me would have been much more defined, but it's shifted for me. You know what I mean?
It's becoming a little more gray.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way too. And it's interesting because I don't think anybody is having this conversation. People are just latching on to the buzzwords. Oh, I don't eat processed foods. And it's like, you know what? I bet you do because I think I've seen you eat yogurt. I think I've seen you eat egg whites. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
now there's all these studies that show that the average American, and even those that are very health conscious, they still don't know the difference between what an ultra processed food is and what it's not.
Yeah. I think
So
there was
let
one point where
go
you
ahead.
mentioned that Americans have a processed food with ultra processed or processed food with every meal. And
Yes.
like I don't even think it. And when you said that, it really kind of made me dial in to everything that goes, like the garlic bread you buy at the grocery store. That's processed. Like, you know what I mean? It looks very basic, and some of these things are more basic, but the level of processed is higher in your kitchen and in your daily lives than you even consider.
Well, 60% of your daily calories come from ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
But that in itself kind of feels like it's out of context because when you think about it, how many calories are in an apple, are in celery, are in
Yep.
carrots?
Yep.
And then when you think of how much calories are in bread or yogurt, so it's
Oh shit.
very easy to take that out of line. So I'm glad the conversation has started. But
Mhm.
once again, when you make things just black or white, I feel like you're really taking it out of context. So tell us down below, what do you think about all foods being labeled based on how processed they are? Are you surprised by some of the group four examples we gave? Let us know down below.